filly for the sake of making the video reasonably quick. She's done all of this, so we're not going to get any major reactions or surprises. So we've got our young horse handling their feet for the first time. Safety is a priority. I don't want to put my hands or head down there and get hurt. So part of handling a young horse, I'm going to use the flag and go all over them. My first handling of their leg is going to be that flag running down their legs. I want them used to that. The second handling, I might use the end of the lead rope and just gently flop it around her legs. That's going to be my next one. If you want, you could use a second lead separate to the horse's head rope and just flop it around. Again, just basically touching her with it. She's good with that. We've obviously can start putting our hands here. To pick her up for the first time, I'm going to wrap that lead rope around her leg. And I'm only going to hold it by hand because if anything happens, I want her to be able to get away. You know, if she has a major problem with it, I want to be able to drop that, have it come off her leg for her safety and mine. So our initial pickup is just going to be with that one hand, 1 foot. We can also bring it towards the front and play with it there. And when she's cool, we'll put it down. So obviously when you do that, your horse might pull around and kick around. My whole idea is I'm just going to stay with her, but I'm not really forcing her at this point. Or it's not so much forcing, but you know, there is an alternative. If she has a major problem, we can let everything go and it's all good. You could, on some horses that are a little bit, you might be a bit more worried about, just loop it around, not even wrap around, and just handle their feet that way. Once they're good with that, you can generally pick their feet up by hand. You know, run down the traditional way and pick their feet up, start that procedure. Obviously the back legs, we get a little bit more concerned about because they could kick. I want to make sure her attention's on me. I got a little bend here and I can just loop it around her leg. I can loop it around her leg and again, just pick her foot up. And if she kicks, I'm just gonna hang on to it as best I can. We could take a wrap around that leg again. So it'll hang on a little bit better. This particular rope's a little short for this job. So this one's a bit longer rope. It's still made out of that really soft cotton, like the big thick rope. And because it's longer, it's a little bit easier for me to put a wrap on and stand a little further away. And even though in her case, you know, I could obviously get down there and do that by hand, just showing you, like, if I didn't know her and, you know, and she could be a problem, I can stay at a distance and just wiggle and let gravity take it to the bottom of a foot and start handling a foot that way. And if she jumps around, again, I've got a longer rope so I can stay further and further away, keep myself at a safe distance, get her leg handled, and progress up to getting shorter and shorter, lifting up here, doing things by hand. Now another trick that I'll sometimes do, so again, soft cotton rope, but I have a heavy carabiner on it. So you could get a metal hondo, like on a lariat rope, or just a ring. So we can just clip that on and off. So we go around the leg, pop that on, let it get down to there. And this is sometimes for that horse that you're picking up to the rear for the first time, but it's also just not a bad little exercise to do. So I'm going to get on the opposite side to her and ask her to lift that foot. And again, you could obviously picture, if you've never done this to a horse, they might hop around. As she gets quieter, I will lower it down, get a little close to the ground. When she quits jumping and kicking around, I'm keeping her nose towards me. I've got that picked up. I can put that down. That's also a great response there, where I've given her a foot back and she's not really, trying to snatch it off me or anything. She's not desperate to get it back. If she's keeping it that soft that I can put it down nicely. So we're getting close to the ground, so she's thinking, when can I have it right back? And if she were to really struggle, I might pick it up a little more. And now, even though she's used to it, we reached her patience level. And she's like, yeah, but I want it back. And the interesting part about patience level is, like, she got impatient. I kept it a little bit longer and then I gave it back to her. So that's what your farrier's got to put up with. Your horse won't be patient for as long as it would normally take to get your horse's foot up. Again, from a safety aspect, because that carabiner, the ring, whatever you've got on that lead rope is heavy and the rope is light, a little bit of movement and it'll pop off. So if I was in an open area like this and I lost her and it all got too difficult, or even in a round yard and it all got, too hard, if I let it go, it's going to come off. And that's a very, very important deal for everybody safety-wise. But if I was doing it on the back leg on this horse for the first time, I'd definitely be in a small yard, a round yard, a secure yard, a stable, something like that. Because obviously they're going to be more inclined to kick and move. But because this filly's pretty good and she's already done all of this, I know I can draw it forward and hold it up. And when she kicks around, I'm just going to try and hang on to it and then give it back. Another safety aspect too, gloves are a good idea. So if she kicks around too much, I don't like to attach it to anything. And some people do get tempted to do that, like wrap it around a post or something. And obviously your horse can really pull on it and you can have a lot of problems. So we're now going to really test her, and she might move around a bit even because she hasn't done this for a little while. I can come out the back. Again, I want to be at a distance where I'm away from her kicking range and I can start to play with that. Now I did this on her initially in a round yard. She kept walking around the yard. She's going to hang on to herself at the other end. That's cool. I did it in a round yard, and of course she moved around and kicked out. And what we're really doing here is out persisting. I'm not trying to force her to hold her foot up. So I've got the rope around and she's running around the yard and she's kicking and, as you would think a horse would. But you can't really get away because the yard's holding her there. And I'm just staying there. And when she eventually stands still and stops kicking and lets me control her foot a little, when she stops, then I give it back. So it's out persisting. It's not trying to hold her foot up the whole time. When she quits running and fighting and gets quieter with her foot, that's when we start letting go of the rope. So that's her way away from it. And the same out here. It doesn't take very long before she'll start to deal with that. Again, I got to make sure I'm at a good distance. And sometimes if I was in a round yard, I won't even have hold of her head. I'm just going to be back here. Moving on, a quick review. We've handled our horse's feet. We've touched them with the flag, we've touched them with a hand, we've wrapped the rope around, like let it flop around. We've wrapped the rope, we've pulled it up. We've done all of those other things and picked her up. So now we know we're pretty good to come down here and lift her foot up. And most people are going to do this. I've lifted her foot up, that's good, and I've patted it. Some people who are really on the ball take their foot out the front, because this is what the farrier is going to do. And I've handled my horse's feet and they're wonderful. The farrier holds them up for a lot longer than that, and that's a bit of an issue. So the same thing, she's out here in an open paddock. She's really good with her feet. I can come down here. Another thing here too, when I handle her feet up at this angle, I'm going to hold her foot, not choke her around the fetlock. Even though I've already conditioned her to that with the rope, I'm still going to hold her foot this way. And I'm still staying forward, and if you're worried, you'd have a handler on her head, making sure the handler was on the same side as you, keeping her nose this way. When I come out the back, we're going to bend it here. Just going to rest it on my knee. Or if I'd never handled her, I might even be there. I'm going to rest it on my knee. Don't get your hip up underneath her leg and try to hold her up. Her job is to hold herself up. You're really only cradling her foot. And again, I've taken a foot out the back. I've tapped it. I've taken it out the front. She's really good. I even sat it on my knee, like the farrier is going to do. So I've got her to that point, but two big things. The farrier is going to hold that foot up a lot more, and ultimately I want her so that if something were to happen, and heaven forbid she gets stuck in a fence, that she would wait for me and still be there the next day. So I've prepared her well, like her foot's been captured by a rope, I've had it up. There's a lot of preparation before we use a hobble. I never used to use hobbles, but I found for my farrier's sake, I needed to use them. I'd handle their feet, I'd get them to that stage and they're really good, but I'm not going to hold them up for 5 or 10 minutes. So it's kind of where hobbles come in. My horse gets stuck in a fence, I don't want it to panic, or stuck in anything, I don't want it to panic. So if they feel captured by the foot, I'm trying to educate them to deal with that. But there's all that preparation work first. You don't bring an unhandled horse in and hobble them, they're just going to hurt themselves. And it's a really stupid way to go. And all of these stages might take a while. It might be a while before you get past the flag and you can put the rope around and they're good with that. So each stage takes as long as the horse needs until you get her sort of result where she's kind of like, yeah, whatever. You know, before you move on to the next stage. So these are all the different levels we're going to go through. And the final level, after all of that preparation, is we're going to hobble up. So one of the front leg hobbles, or the way I would start working with the front leg, this big, wide, soft cotton rope. There's going to be one around the bottom. We're going to pick a foot up, so there's like a crossover there. And then we're going to tie it off at the top. And because it's rope, we need to make sure it's quite firm. And a reef knot. And if you don't know what a reef knot is, go ahead and look it up, because it is important here to be able to get it undone in a hurry. And if she hops around, because it's a rope on, I need to keep a little tension up here, because if this slides down here, then it'll eventually come off. But again, she's passed all those other levels before we do this. And then I can leave her here long enough that she has to learn to deal with what a farrier would. And most of us, our backs aren't as good as our farriers. Our farriers have much stronger backs, or barefoot trimmers, doesn't matter which one you get to do your horse's feet. Most of us aren't conditioned to stay down here and hang on. And if the horse jumps around, no one can hang on. So this is part of moving on from that. So we could leave her here, and you can obviously condition her to more and more. You got to be reasonable. And it's kind of good for her to hop around because you can see what's going to happen. Your horse is going to hop around and have problems with it. And you actually need to get to that point where the horse has gone, yeah, that's nice, but now I'm sick of it. I want my foot back. And wait until they, a bit like she is now, starting to fiddle, starting to move. She can't quite get away from it, but she's not doing anything too silly. But again, I need to get her to that point where she's just a little bored, she wants her foot back, and she fights it just a little bit. Because your farrier has to deal with that. Your barefoot trimmer has to deal with that. I want her to get to a point where she tries it out, and then there's, okay, I'm bored, I want my foot. Go a little bit longer to where she kind of just accepts it and stands still. So even that little change in expression in her face, like she chewed, licked her lips, there's a little bit more acceptance. We're just going to wait for her to be a little quieter. But she's had it up for quite a long time now. So probably enough for any trimmer or farrier to get the job done. And we can undo it and let it go. Another good one, and this is a lot easier for her, is just a straight hobble through the front. We'll go around there. We'll probably put 2 wraps, maybe even 3. It's up around the top. And again, a reef knot so that we know it's going to be easy enough to undo. Now picture this horse has never done it before. I'm not going to leave them. I'm staying here. I'm going to wait until she tests it, till she tries to move, and just make sure she's dealing with it well. If I know she's dealing with it, you could leave her alone in a secure area and make sure you're keeping an eye on her. But this is the one where, like I said, maybe she gets tangled up in something. I'd love her to just be standing there in the morning going, please let me out, rather than thrash around and hurt themselves. So I still think this is good to do, again, after all the other preparation. Another hobble that I really like is these all leather ones. And that's the hobble. But it's more made for an adult, you know, a fully grown horse, and she's a yearling, so that might be a little bit small. So I wouldn't, which is why I was using the rope ones. Not really fond of hobbles, you know, with a length of chain in them, just because they obviously thrash around and they're a bit tougher. But yeah, there's no buckle on here, it just kind of pops through and comes back. A little bit harder to find that hobble though. This one's obviously, they're a little bit more expensive. If you were handling young horses a lot, you'd probably want to own a pair. This is a breeding hobble, but it can obviously be used as a sideline. I don't, you know, a padded strap around the back leg is good. But again, picture, lots of preparation before we went here. This has a couple of breakaway points on it. I've got this little tag, and that's made to pull out of there really easy. Any of these jobs, and when you round a horse, you should have a pocket knife, you know, just in case. This front strap is also made to, it's not clipped on, it will slide through when there's no tension on it. So the very first time I put it on a horse, I'd make sure I had a setup. We'll make this a little longer. I'd make sure I had a setup where I could put that on her foot. And then come around the front. On a fully grown horse, I'd come between their front legs, and the only reason I didn't on her is because she's kind of small and there's other ways to get her back feet up. So we can then just drag that up and hold her foot up that way. Again, keeping me out of harm's way a little bit in case she had a big problem with it. But you shouldn't have a big problem because you've done your preparation. So a good one of these is essential, but there's a couple of very important breakaway points on it. And again, I've never had a problem using hobbles, but I've only ever put them on horses that I've already educated them very well about handling their feet. But what I can't do is I can't stand in that position for as long as my trimmer or my farrier is going to be. And that's where hobbles come in. The other place they come in is, again, got hung up in a fence. I think that's about it for hobbling. You do have other straps that people use to hobble. So, you know, some traditional leather hobbles. Obviously your front leg goes around here, that buckles there. You can also tie their front leg up. So when we did that with the rope before, so that bit would go around the bottom. And then, so it's a simple crossover and we'd be strapping up there. So it's another hobble that, you know, you can use that is very good. Say I had a horse who's never been handled before. I've done my groundwork, I've taught them to come up, I've taught them to accept me, I've patted them down, I've touched them with the flag. I've had the flag all over them and I've flopped the lead rope around their legs, so I've done all of that. And they're really good with it. I can get my hand down, you know, maybe to here. Again, working, you know, a lot more unhandled horse. Keeping her head towards me, handling her this way, getting down to about here. But still a little bit worried about having to get my hands right down there. We can use a lariat rope, and obviously this is more for trained professionals working that type of horse. A stiff rope and a metal hondo. So for the same reason, a metal hondo will kick off and I can stand it up in front of a leg, ask her to walk forward, step into it, and then take hold of a foot that way. Now, it's not for the average person. You know, the average person, great horse, you're handling them all the time. Soft ropes are paramount. It's for that person who's not handling a horse whose feet are so good. So we can do that. And the same deal, I'm still going to hold that by hand. You probably almost definitely want gloves on for that. And you'll definitely be in a secure yard. There's nowhere in the world you would do it out here in this open arena. But again, if she runs around and around and I put slack in it, because of the weight of the hondo, the weight of that metal loop, it's going to fall off. But I can still handle her legs the same way. I don't like to ride another horse and dally up because sometimes my skill levels weren't that good and I might hang onto it too hard and too tight. If you can't hang onto it by hand with a set of gloves, you're probably putting too much pressure on. Again, I'm trying to out-persist, not hold the horse's foot elevated. So again, you know, I've got this horse who's pretty waspy, got some problems, and I've started messing with their feet. I've used that. Sometimes I've just left slack in it and wiggled it until it came off. You can also get fencing wire and make a long hook, you know, and basically get that hook down there to grab it and put a little bit more slack in it and get it off quicker. But yeah, obviously different ways to do it, a lot wilder horse. But again, you know, you've taught them to come in, you've sacked them out, you've done some preparation, you're not launching straight into that on day one. Obviously, if we're going through a back leg, same deal, we can stand it up in there because we're using a lariat rope, ask her to walk forward, she steps into it, and it gets down around a foot. And again, she's running around the round yard, kicking and kicking and kicking. My job is to out persist, not hold a foot up. When she quits kicking, and I can move her foot a little bit and she doesn't kick, that's when she gets the release. And again, we're talking a wilder horse here, and they're good, they've made progress. I still don't want to put my head or my hand down there. I could either wiggle it till it falls off or get a long wire hook to pull that hondo and get it off. That's a pretty exhaustive look on how to handle a horse's feet. You know, good ones, bad ones, from start to finish, the steps that I'd like to go through and make sure that it's all working. Like, comment, and subscribe. And comment if you'd like to see me. Obviously I did it with her and she's already had all this done. If you really want to see me do it on a horse who's never had their feet handled and a lot more reactive, leave a comment below and we'll get to that video at some point as well. Thanks again for watching. Catch you on the next one. G'day, thank you so much for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, turn on the notifications bell, that would be awesome. Thank you. Cheers.